One of my favorite things to do in GTA 5 is drag race at the airport. I do it all the time with random people or with my friends, and I honestly have a great time. Sometimes even in live streams we set up this whole drag racing tournament and it actually becomes something that's really fun to do, and I'm sure a lot of you guys love drag racing as well. And I'm sure a lot of you have also watched Fast and Furious and know about 10-second cars. Obviously 10-second cars are cars that can complete a quarter mile in under 10 seconds. Have you ever wondered how many 10-second cars there actually are in GTA 5? Well, lucky for you came across this video, because that's what we're going to be going over today. I set up a track, it's exactly a quarter mile long, and we're going to be testing it out against some of the best cars and motorcycles in GTA 5 Online. With that said, I hope you enjoy, and let's get into it. First, we're going to go over some vehicles that just didn't make the cut. They just got over 11 seconds for the quarter mile time. Starting with the GP1, it got an 11.13 quarter mile time. And if you want to see the stats of all the supercars and sports cars in this video, there's a link down below in the description. The S80RR also didn't make the cut. It got a time of 11.42 seconds. And also, the Gauntlet Hellfire and the Kamada didn't make the cut either, but for some reason, the clips didn't record. The Gauntlet Hellfire got a time of 11.29, and the Kamada got a time of 11.59, so there's another 3 vehicles that just didn't make it. Another vehicle that was just edged out was the Zaruso. It got a time of 11.4 seconds, and most of these vehicles don't pass, mainly because of their launch. The traction just is not immaculate, and on that launch, it really screws them over, but the Zaruso got a time of 11.4. Another vehicle that was just edged out was the Death Bike. It got a time of 11.05 seconds, which kind of sucks. It's a great vehicle, it's really fast, handles pretty well, but it just does not have the best acceleration in terms of doing a quarter mile. We also have the Rampant Rocket, which got a time of 11.59 seconds, almost 12 seconds to complete the quarter mile. That's shocking. I thought this vehicle would slap since it's literally a drag bike. One of my favorite supercars, the Tiguan, was also just edged out. It got a time of 11.04 seconds, which kind of sucks. Its acceleration is not too perfect off the line. It's still a pretty great supercar, but in terms of the quarter mile time, it was just edged out. And finally here we have the Veto and the Veto Classic. They suck. This thing got a time of 15.03 seconds on the quarter mile. Just don't use it on a quarter mile. Now we're getting into some vehicles that are above a 10-second quarter mile, but below an 11-second quarter mile. So that's actually pretty decent. We have the Scramjet up first. That got a time of 10.28 seconds, which is pretty damn good. That's without using any kind of rocket boost. So props to the Scramjet. The Vigilante actually did a really great job as well. It got a time of 10.16 seconds, which is very close to a 10-second quarter mile. It did pretty well, and once again, that's without using any kind of rocket boost or any kind of double clutch and shit or anything like that. Once again, props to the Vigilante. We also have the Tulip in this section. It got a time of 10.62 seconds on the standing quarter mile, which is pretty good. That's without doing anything except a double clutch. I did double clutch this vehicle and that allowed it to get there. Obviously, if you guys use a muscle car, you can destroy the quarter mile if you hit the wheelie perfectly. I know you can do it really well in the Tulip, and I believe in the Click as well. Some other cars are really hard to do it with. I'm terrible at it, as you guys are going to see here in a second. But yeah, if you guys can nail the wheelie, you will absolutely destroy, and almost every muscle car will be able to beat a quarter mile in under 10 seconds. We also have the Apocalypse ZR380 in this section. It got a time of 10.35 seconds, which is pretty good. That's without using NOS as well. It does drift around a lot, but I personally like that, and also it's pretty quick at accelerating. Also in this section is the Krieger. It got a time of 10.67 seconds to complete the standing quarter mile, which is still pretty decent. Many supercars won't be able to do too well in this, but honestly, 10.6 seconds is still a pretty good time. Next up, we have the X80 Proto. Now this car got a time of 10.67 seconds as well. The exact same as the Krieger. I personally like the Krieger a lot more. I think it's a better car. But in terms of their acceleration in a quarter mile, they tied. Next up, we have the Arena War Dominator with NOS. and it got a time of 10.96 seconds. The car itself has a pretty decent acceleration, not the best traction. Once you kick that NOS in though, it does get a pretty decent time, but then again, that's kind of cheating, but at the same time it's not really, but I don't really know. It got a time of 10.96 seconds. Next up we have the Imperator with NOS. It got a time of 10.77 seconds. It's one of my favorite cars in the game. It's actually really good at drag racing if you use NOS and launch it correctly, but sometimes it won't work. But honestly, it's still a really great car, and it did get a pretty decent time on the quarter mile. Next up, we got the Jugular, one of my favorite sports cars to use in terms of performance. It got a 10.88 quarter mile time, which is not the best, but then again, I use this car mainly for handling. Its handling is impeccable. It's just incredible. And if you ever need a good sports car to use in any kind of races that are somewhat hard to handle in, the Jugular is the car. Next up, we have the Progen Emirates. This car got a time of 10.85 seconds, which is pretty decent, but like I said, most of the supercars won't do too well in this. I don't really know why they're not good at quarter miles. Not too sure, but I mean, it's still pretty decent. 10.85 is not a bad time at all. Next up, we have the Oppressor Mark 1 without using any kind of rocket boost or anything like that. It got a time of 10.95 seconds. It was just edged into this section. It was almost edged out, but it just made it. It's a pretty great vehicle. It's obviously really fast and fun to play with. It's pretty decent. Quarter mile time, not the greatest, but it's still not bad. Next up, we have the HAKUCHOU Drag. Obviously, you would expect this vehicle to be pretty decent at a quarter mile considering it's a drag bike. It got a time of 10.89 seconds. The reason why, you guys just saw that launch. This thing does not have the greatest traction off the line, but once it gets going, it's gone. It's a pretty decent drag bike, but the traction is not the best. Next up, we have the Shitaro. I've started using this bike a lot more recently. It's pretty decent. It got a time of 10.45 seconds in the quarter mile. That's pretty damn good, a lot better than all of the other bikes in the game. Obviously, it's one of the best bikes, which is why I started using it a lot more in races. Next up, we have the Neo. It's another pretty awesome vehicle. It got a time of 10.81 seconds in the standing quarter mile. That's not bad at all. The vehicle is pretty average, it looks pretty cool, and it's pretty decent in drag races. Next up, we have the Coil Raiden. Even though it is electric, it does not mean it is the best vehicle in the game. It got a time of 10.29 seconds. With electric vehicles, if you could do a burnout with your front tires and then just hold that burnout for like 10 seconds and then just launch it, they'll take off. This did a pretty decent job, but it still did not beat the 10-second quarter mile. 10.29 seconds is pretty great though. Next up, we have the Devasty 8, another beautiful car. It got a time of 10.43 seconds on the standing quarter mile. That's not bad, it's not amazing, but it's still pretty decent. It's an awesome car, it handles pretty well, it's kinda long, but honestly, all in all, it's a pretty great vehicle. Taking a look at some of the F1 cars now, we have the PR4. It got a time of 10.39 seconds, which is pretty great. That's also without using the curse boost. So honestly, F1 cars are pretty decent at drag racing. Next, we have the DR1. It got a time of 10.42 seconds, which is still pretty decent, a little bit higher than the PR4, but still not bad. Next, we have the R88. It got a time of 10.22 seconds, which is actually really good. I thought this was one of the worst F1 cars, but in terms of drag racing, it's actually got a pretty decent time. Next up, we have the Italy GTO. We all know this car is also really great, and it's really good at drag racing. It got a time of 10.3 seconds on the quarter mile. So now you guys know this time, get ready to compare it to some of the cars that actually beat the 10-second quarter mile. We also have the Italy RSX. It got the exact same time as the Italy GTO. That's pretty surprising. I was not doing any kind of special launches with either of the vehicles, just revving them up. They got the exact same time, 10.3 seconds, which is pretty decent. By the way, be sure to check out DigiZani. They'll hook you up with tons of discounted games, gaming accessories, discounted gift cards, and in-game currency for dozens of your favorite games. Don't forget to use code FROLICS at checkout for a 10% discount. Now it's time to go over the 10-second cars in GTA 5 Online. First up, we have the Tesseract. It got a 9.95 second quarter mile. Once again, electric cars, if you do a burnout with either the front wheels or the back wheels, it reduces the time. On average, I'd say by about 1 second. But that's pretty great. The Tesseract can beat a standing quarter mile in under 10 seconds. Next up, we have the Death Bike with NOS. It has a quarter mile time of 9.36 seconds. I did test out the other Arena War vehicles and they did not pass, but the Death Bike did with NOS. So if you want to use it in a quarter mile, you're gonna slap with it. Next, we have the Oppressor Mark II. I probably shouldn't have added it to this list, but it got a quarter mile time of 8.48 seconds without using the boost, but that's pretty much because it doesn't need traction. It literally just spins up its jet engine and takes off. Next up, we have the Neon, another amazing car. I use it all the time in races. Once again, if you spin up the front two wheels, you'll fly away. And this car got a time of 9.95 seconds, which is pretty great. The exact same time as the Tesseract, but this is a sports car. So you get the power of a supercar in a sports car. And in my opinion, I think the Neon is better than the Tesseract just because the Neon can spin up both its front wheels and its rear wheels, while the Tesseract can only do a burnout with its rear wheels. I love the Neon. I use it all the time in sports races. You're probably not surprised. We have the Cyclone with a time of 9.82 seconds. Once again, spinning up the front two tires allows for an impeccable launch. This car just flew away, and honestly, it is better than the Tesseract, it's better than the Neon, it's one of the best, if not actually the best electric car in the game. The acceleration is incredible on this thing. Next up, we have the BR8. You're probably wondering why it wasn't back there. Well, that's because it's a 10-second F1 car. It got a time of 9.94 seconds, which is pretty great. I do believe this is the best F1 car to use. It also looks the coolest, like it just looks mean and aggressive, and it's also very, very fast off the line and in terms of top speed as well. And finally, the fastest quarter mile time is done by the Faggio. It got a 4.87 second quarter mile time. Look at this thing fly. Like, it's incredible of how fast this bike is, and the best part is, it is dirt cheap. It's awesome. The Faggio is incredibly fast. So the best standing quarter mile time to a street vehicle goes to the Death Bike while using NOS. Only NOS with arena vehicles. No rocket boost or anything like that with any other vehicles. The Death Bike has a 9.3 second quarter mile time, but for just street vehicles in general, no boosts or anything like that, the Cyclone blows it out of the park with a time of 9.8 seconds. So the Cyclone is deemed the fastest quarter mile street vehicle in the game. Of course, if you use rocket boosts and perfect launches and things like that, it will affect everything, and then I really don't know which one would actually be the best. But if you're just driving normally, the Cyclone will slap in a standing quarter mile. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will catch you guys in the next one.